Welcome, everybody. As people are joining in, we hope you've enjoyed the beginning of our event and time together with some corny jokes to get your brains thinking and moving. We'll just start in a couple of minutes. We wanted to give everybody a moment to get here. And we'll welcome you to our Cape of Wonders. It's an invention convention. It's time for us to begin our event together. And it is now my pleasure to welcome you officially to the Cape of Wonders. My name is Steve Vieweg. I'm sporting my fabulous Cape of Wonders here to help me get ready for an evening of brainstorming and a lot of thinking and exciting fun. But my job is to tell you a little bit about the background here. And the sponsor of our event tonight is the Center for Translating Research into Practice, which was a brainchild of Dr. Petronio, who is a professor of communications and was instituted when she and our former chancellor, Charles Vance, came to IUPUI way back in 2003, when they noticed that a lot of the research that happens here at IUPUI is what we would call translational. It's taking ideas or using ideas that we create and applying them to solve problems within our community. Much of the work that happens here at IUPUI, as you know, is students, faculty, staff, community partners working together to generate knowledge and to use that knowledge and to try to fix things in our community. In 2013, Charles and Sandra formed an award called the Vance Petronio Translating Research into Practice Faculty Award. And the idea of this award was to recognize an IUPUI faculty member who goes above and beyond in their translational research, and to then work with them for an entire year to try to expand and celebrate the work that they do. So our 8th awardee is Dr. Peter Schubert, who tonight is going to lead us in this amazing discussion about, well, I guess we'll see. We'll let him tell us all about it, but we are delighted to have Dr. Schubert as the awardee for this year. He is a brainstorm of ideas. We've had so much fun so far learning about his work and finding ways to invite others, and that's why you're here tonight, to see what we could do to do something throughout this entire academic year to move the needle forward. Oh, how's that? Is that a good one? Needle sewing thread? It might fit. I don't know, Dr. Schubert, we'll see. So it's my pleasure now to turn over the program to Dr. Schubert. Please give him a warm electronic welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. My voice comes across okay?
You're very quiet, so you'll have to speak louder.
Okay. Nori, I'm going to request to share a screen. Is the Cape of Wonders showing up on your monitor?
We can't really hear you, Peter. You'll have to either speak louder or get closer to a mic somehow.
The Cape of Wonders showing up on your monitors.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I want to introduce this concept. The most important thing is that those of you who are participating, we want to tap into your ingenuity and your creativity to help us in our exploration of how the Cape of Wonders could become a central theme for the Jaguar campus here in Indianapolis, where we get participation from all the schools on one common project that can be something we can go to the community, we can go to funding agencies and to corporate enterprises and get their engagement with this and engage students in getting involved in this. So we're going to the forefront of sartorial expertise and engineering by homeschool, but also we want to get input from the community so that we can get your ideas on how to build this into a very broad, holistic type of project. So I want to start this off with some ideas and give you some tools to think by, but you are by no means limited to the starting point that I make. I recognize that I might have blind spots or areas that I'm not as familiar with, and that's really why we've invited you to join us in the Cape of Wonders Invention Convention. So let me start your brains by drawing a few pictures. So if we first look at one thing we all have in common, every one of us was born with no clothing. We all came into this world without clothing, and right away we went from an environment that was warm and had been the same for a long time, and all of a sudden it was 25 degrees colder. So if you imagine rolling out of bed and all of a sudden being outside in this kind of weather, that's what it was like the very first moment of your life. So you may not have a conscious memory, but it's in there somewhere. And right away you hungered for something to protect you from this cold, some kind of protection. So your parent, the people attending your birth, a midwife or a doctor, would have wrapped you in a blanket once you got your lungs started. So ever since then, for most of our lives, we are wearing clothing. So we don't think about it sometimes as what all of this does or why it came about, but it protects us against the elements, being too hot or too cold, from going into brambles, stepping into mud. So our shoes are clothing also. But also, clothing eventually became a part of our aesthetic. It became something that was an identification for us. So what you choose to wear and how you wear it is a statement about you as an individual. So clothing can be very personal in that way. So I want you to think about what clothing is. There are some fabrics that are, some materials that are solid, leather or vinyl. So we're not talking so much about those, but more woven materials. So if you think of a flag, look very closely at the United States flag, which I rendered kind of crudely here, and then zoom in. So we're zooming in on this little tiny circle here, out to this larger circle. You look very closely under a magnifying glass at the corner of a flag. You can see the woven fibers that make up that fabric, and then also the stitching around the edges, which is made with thread. So now if we look even closer at those fibers, the fibers that make up thread or yarn are themselves made of smaller fibers. And these might be animal origin, like silk or wool. They might be plant-like in nature. They might be linen or cotton. And they might be synthetic, like rayon, polyester, or spandex. So one of the properties of clothing material, of fabric, is that it's resistant against pulling. Cotton does not stretch. It shrinks, it doesn't stretch. Other synthetics will stretch to some degree, but for the most part, we want their flexibility. We want them to move with us. All of us who are putting on this event are wearing capes tonight. I hope they'll get to show them to you. But we want things that move and bend and turn. We're always in motion, and our clothing needs to do that as well. So some garments are armor, are protective, more so than just against the elements. We can think of a suit of armor as being something that protects us against enemies. Now, what we're going to do is put things into this fabric. So I want you to imagine that you are shrunk down to the size of a grain of rice. So think of Fantastic Voyage from 1974, or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from 1994. And now you've been shrunk down somehow, and you're looking at one thread. You're probably wearing clothing right now. If you're not, don't tell anyone. But if you look closely at it, you can see those individual threads. If you're looking closer at a microscope, you would see that there are bands of threads. In very few materials does a strand go for more than a few centimeters or inches. For the most part, these things are interwoven in such a way that they stick together and make this strand. Now, let's talk about touch. We have an incredibly sensitive sense of touch. If you feel a countertop or a countertop made of granite, for example, it can be made very smooth. If there's a bump on there that's about 10 microns high, you can feel that with your finger pretty easily. 10 microns in the nanometer scale range is huge. So we can now make individual electronic devices that are much smaller than 10 microns, maybe 1 micron, even smaller with nanotechnology. So that is happening now. We're doing that research here on our campus, and we're trying to make devices ever smaller and then put those into a format which is also flexible. So we can start thinking about having normal fabric yarn that now has embedded in it, say, a conductor. Like a conductor, I can use something like gold wire or an aluminum wire. These are extremely thin wires. We could also have sensors embedded in here that detect stress or strain. And we might even have computer chips. The chips that you see, they're about the size of a fingernail. Those have the packaging around them, but the chips themselves can be very, very tiny depending on the functionality. So if we think about an entire fleet, we have the opportunity to put hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, possibly billions of individual devices, each of them doing something unique and different. And that's what we're asking you to do, is to think of a lot of different things that you can do, and especially looking for connections between them. You can do A and B, and A and B together do something C that was not even thought of before. That's the point of an invention. And so that's what we want to get to today. So let me very quickly go through a couple of thought starters. So let's think first about a bird. A bird, and some birds are blue. Think of an indigo button or a blue jay. In birds, their feathers do not contain blue pigment. Blue pigment is very rare in nature. Instead, if we were to do that same business of zooming in on those feathers, we would see a series of ridges. So the space in between them is about 0.45 microns. What's a micron? You take a hair and you look at a hair from your face, from your eyebrows, or whatever. The thickness of that hair is about 50 microns. So we're talking about something that's now 1/100th of the thickness of your hair. At that level, then this will reflect light, and all the other wavelengths of light are reflected except for blue, which comes out very strong. We can take these ridges and we can move them back and forth to make them different sizes. We can manipulate those with what's called an microelectrical transfer. We can take materials that bend and flex by electricity and cause them to change color. So you may have seen the Hunger Games, and they wore a garment that had flames on it. We could start putting patterns, images that on your clothing. You can wear the same shirt every day, come back to that, and you can change the image from the front of that every time you wanted to. If you think of dirt that gets on your clothing, you have to wash your clothes a lot, go to the dry cleaner. Sometimes that dirt is particles on you. We can do the same manipulation of those ridges to release the dirt. So if I got some mud sprayed on my cape, a mud puddle, it could potentially just fall right off from the action of the cape. You can have self-cleaning fabrics. Then we have energy all around us. So you know that every time you have your cell phone and you carry this around, it's being connected with cell towers all around the city. Those electromagnetic waves that are traveling through space are just some of the energy going around us all the time. We've got sunlight, we've got heat, we've got the motion of our body. There's all kinds of energy sources that we can harvest and pull those into fabrics and make things like small batteries that will be able to hold a charge and operate those chips. So we want you to think about that as well. We can take stronger fabrics like Teflon, Kevlar, Nomex, and these are things that are used to make vests, bulletproof vests. We can have those things be connected in such a way that one fiber might have some bits of Kevlar in it and other bits of chips. And then with a proper signal, they can go from something loose and flowy, which Kevlar isn't, into a rigid vest. And maybe detect if, for example, there's a fast projectile coming at you, and suddenly your cape would turn into something rigid. If you could make your cape rigid, you could make something into a regalia wing, where you can hang by helmet like James Bond in Live and Let Die, and also Moonraker. We could make things that reflect laser beams, that block electromagnetic pulses, and we can have sufficient power. You might be able to take off our cape and set it down and have it move around. Oh my gosh. But maybe one day we can fly. I don't know how we do that, but these are the kind of ideas that we've invited you to come think about. So some other thought starters. Medical devices. Think about if your clothing was monitoring your health. So there are many medical conditions that require you to continuously or frequently monitor different aspects of your health. If that can be embedded in your clothing, then that can also communicate. We can make radio signals come out of your cape, use it like an antenna. Antenna does not have to be a mast anymore. No longer do cell phones have that awkward antenna sticking out of them. There's a patch antenna inside of here. It's just a square piece that's about 2 millimeters thick, and that's where all of our signals come in and out. Those patches can be made flexible and woven into the fabric. You can communicate your health monitoring out into the world. We can get wireless power transfer. Research is going on in my team, and beam power wirelessly, radio waves, in a concentrated way that you can pick up in other places, so that we can beam it to your cape and recharge it as you walk past our lab. Oh my gosh, we can make music. So there's stuff called interfacing in my new cape here, my cape of wonder. Imagine if there was a flat speaker in there. Speakers now can be made flat out of capacitor. So we can have, I could have sound here, or I don't have to wear those pesky things in my ears that never stay in there anyway. I could have my own sound. We could even be watching. There could be cameras embedded in the fabric, looking around me, looking for either somebody I'm trying to find or somebody I'm trying to avoid, and they can tell me, turn to the left, and then they won't be able to see you. Get away. Your imagination should be unlimited in this. So think about how we can use this to detect danger, how to detect something we're attracted to, entertainment, excitement, fun, something that could protect you as well as keep you warm, keep you cool. We have fabrics now that can wick away moisture. We have fabrics that can do so many different things, but now we're on the precipice of being able to add nanotechnology to our fabrics. And this can happen here at IUPUI through the Cape of Wonders initiative. So, as Steve mentioned earlier, my objective during this year, and the interns that are working with me, we're trying to develop this campus-wide cohesive idea, but it's got to start with something that connects all of us. So hopefully to engage all of you, but most importantly, we want everybody to contribute their ideas. We're going to break out in some groups here. We'll tell you about how that's going to happen in just a minute. And then in those groups, we're going to come up with a lot of ideas through a brainstorming process. Then we'll get back here and bring those together, and then look at what we got, and try to, then afterwards, we'll boil this down to things that really need to sing, really bring in a lot of collaborative work in a multidisciplinary way, and then forward these through the next year, try to get more faculty members and students and community engaged with all this stuff so we can turn this into something really amazing. But you're here right at the start, and I'm going to turn this over now, I believe, to Roy to explain to you how the breakout session will go.
Our task now is to bring back the things that we came up with in our breakout sessions, and then we're recording. Nori, we're recording this. Is that right? Okay, so on your screen you see 2 people with capes. These are our student interns. Rashi and Nuri are working on this. So we're capturing all this information, and we're going to sift through this, boil this down. You'll get a minimum amount of emails from us, but mostly it'd be to say, did we forget anything, or are there any other ideas that you've come up with this? And then we're going to take this out and try to make more other connections across the campus. So for the team 2, do you guys have a spokesperson to report out your ideas? Karen White, good to see you, Karen. Unmute yourself, please.
I did just put a message. I'm getting a low bandwidth message in case I suddenly poof. But all of our notes, I tried to type them in the chat, so you can review those there and see kind of what we were aiming at. I think a lot of our discussion on the topic of security was the issue of what's the difference between security and protection. Okay. And so a lot of the applications that we might think of, we could think they need both. You need technologies to address both, especially for things like medical applications. If your clothing is gathering data about you, who gets to see that data? So the security of the data versus the protective or assistive nature of collecting whatever information is being collected, correct? One of our first ideas was, again, assistive technologies, which can be embodied in a variety of different ways. And they mentioned people who have physical mobility problems and having, functional items that help them with walking or standing and that sort of activity. I think, again, the medical monitoring versus, I don't think we went very much farther than that, but anyone else in the group is free to chime in. And power generation, of course. But again, I know a lot of people working on the issue of freestanding power generation in a variety of contexts. And I think people have still not managed to really, hone in on the sweet spot for what would you use that power for and how much power can you generate. And a lot of that might be enabling technology for the other applications, the health monitoring or whatever. So you don't have to worry about changing batteries and things like that. So.
And Karen, I wonder, at the very end of our small group, there was this, I thought, pretty interesting discussion started between Vicky and Sarah, and then even Rashi, about different viewpoints, like a computer science viewpoint versus an engineering viewpoint. So can you guys share a little bit about your thinking? I had to miss the end. So did you resolve the wonder, or what happened?
Well, I think we both, we realized that there are both aspects. Not only do you need the engineering aspect of how do you do it, but physically, but you also need, for almost anything we've talked about, you'll need some software, and that's
So for example, like how Vicky is a computer science major and I'm a computer engineering major, there's a Venn diagram where there are things in common, but we would think the same things differently. For example, if Vicky was thinking in computer science, she would think about the software, how would she protect the data? And we talked about the cybersecurity, which is become a huge thing now, which is actually a major now at IUPUI as well. So that's what a computer science major would think about. Vicky agrees with me, right? Yeah.
And then I think we also added the caveat that most all of us are techies in the room, and we were wishing there was someone with fashion design / artistic kind of STEAM as opposed to STEM. And we're not sure how that's faring within our own STEM community, whether we're really achieving STEAM or not.
We are fortunate to have Jim Poyser. He provided that in spades. His first idea was to put sprouts and tomatoes on the Cape. And that got us off into a wild direction. But Sarah, I wanted to ask you about this. First of all, thanks for participating. But in terms of software, is this something that we would do offline and program the Cape? Or is there a way that we might be able to make it so you could program it on the fly? Or maybe Vic, is a question for you.
I guess you would choose one or the other depending upon the application. Most of the applications I've suggested would be probably programmed once, but certainly if you were trying to learn something about your environment maybe, or communicate with someone despite technological problems or handicaps, that might be someplace where you would edit on the fly.
Vicky, anything to add to that discussion on whether to do it once and go, or maybe make it adaptive on the fly?
I don't Nothing that I can think of.
I appreciate that you took time to think. That's something I don't always do, and I often wish I did. So group 2, any other things to report out?
I think the last point we made is that some of these things, the enabling technologies, we might need to take more issues and concerns into the design with the thought of it, how green it is, because generating extra waste, generating materials that will be considered a adverse effect on the environment long term won't get us where we want to be.
So that resonates with something we had in group 1, where we talked about designing it so that at the end of the life, it would be easy to recycle. If we embed all kinds of crazy stuff into it, a recycler might say, I can't recycle this. You put all kinds of crazy materials and you just can't do it. So if we design it from the get-go to be easy to disassemble and then recycle, that can contribute to like a circular economy. That was another thing that Jim suggested to us.
And then as the non-techie person in the group, and the closest thing we had to fashion design, given what I'm wearing, I raised the question about the data, because a couple of our ideas were like medical, like collecting information or helping people do things. But then I wondered, well, what happens to that data? And what about privacy and security? And we had an interesting conversation at the beginning about, what is it private? Is it secure for who, etc. So that was another piece that we talked about.
Absolutely.
And we're dying to hear what you talked about, especially since you had a fashion expert on there.
Wow. Okay, so we talked about embedding antennas in the fabric to do energy harvesting. And then AJ mentioned that we might want to use woven fabrics because the lines and the wires will go from point A to point B. So you're going to get the least amount of resistance. And so it's more efficient, it's going to be lighter and so forth. She says maybe knitted materials wouldn't be as good because you're going back and forth with the same strand and that would make too much resistance. But then we talked about how some knitted materials are looped, especially she said the fingers of a knitted glove. So loops of things are inductors, and inductors could, for example, generate a plasma beam that could shoot out of your fingertips in the glove of wonders. Okay, that's just one idea. Then one of our earlier ones that went off of Jim's idea to grow tomatoes on the Cape, we thought, well, maybe we could have the Cape to shed seeds, like wildflower seeds, and we could potentially put these at the trailhead to a big park. And then as people go onto the trails, they don one of these capes, and then here and there it would sprinkle native plants to combat against the invasive species encroachment. And if we could also make it so that these would repel mosquitoes, maybe they're putting out some ultrasound around your head, so the mosquitoes would say, can't stand the noise, I'm getting out of here. Then you give them an advantage by wearing this, and you give the environment an advantage by being able to get these great seeds. We talked about inflatable cape. Jim's got a strong focus on climate issues and how that's going to affect us. So we thought about a cape that could be inflatable. Like in airplanes, they have the ones where you can blow up your own life vest, but we might make them self-inflatable. They could be something you could use for fun, for rafting or kayaking, as well as if you're in a dangerous situation with a flood, it could give you the buoyancy you need to not drown as you're being swept down the river. And it might also communicate out to first responders your location and your situation, so they would know to come and pick you up in their helicopter. And AJ said, well, building on that, we could put an accelerometer into it. So if you took a tumble, it could say, you just had a nasty fall. There could even be a speaker in here that says, we think you might have just fallen. Do you want me to call for emergency backup? And then it could communicate that out and bring a first responder to you. Then we talked about producing energy from solar power. And then Nuri suggested that we could take body heat and use that to get energy. And AJ pointed out you need a difference in heat. So if you're in an environment where your body heat is different from your environment, we can pull heat from your body and make electricity that can charge itty bitty batteries that are inside the fabrics. But by pulling the heat away from your body, voila, you are cooled off. So she also talked about some dogs have an undercoat and an overcoat, and they're comfortable in both cool and warm climates. So we could have the cape have two sides. It could be reversible so that one side cools you off and the other side keeps you warm. And then Jim brought up the idea of using dissimilar fabrics. And as we have the warp and the woof and these things are crossing over each other, at the junctions between dissimilar fabrics, that's where we could put electrochemical devices in there that could potentially sniff out dangerous chemicals. They could also be the point at which the cooling is done. So there's a lot of neat things we could do at those intersections. I mentioned the end of life considerations and using recycling as much as possible. Jim also said we should, as much as possible, do this locally, make it locally produced. So if we could, for example, 3D print these garments from materials that are tough to recycle and also design it so it's easy to uncycle and recycle that way, then we're living lightly on the land in that way. I think that captures most of our big stuff from group number one.
Well, I'm personally intrigued about this idea of the garment that can keep you warm or cool. And could we have that like right away before my mother-in-law moves here for the winter? Because she's always cold and the rest of us are going like, whew. So if she had her own thing to just, maybe she would wear a cape that would keep her warm all the time. And then we would have power to run the furnace at a higher temperature like she needs.
Yeah, we even thought about instead of just being a cape, it could be a bed sheet or a quilt that you could flip over on one side in the winter and the other side in the summer.
Wow.
We could even make it programmable. So, you know, my wife likes to be warm. I like to be cool. We could adjust each side of our blankets.
And it could just use the same energy from your body. I think that's awesome.
Exactly. Okay, any final thoughts before we wrap this up for tonight?
Well, what's next?
I'm with you on the two-sided blanket. Keep moving.
Yes, sir.
And again, I'm adding comments in the chat so you can retrieve those, Peter, later for whatever the next steps are.
Excellent.
So Peter, what are the next steps? Because I said to our group at the end that the intention is that this is just a beginning and that this is the brain trust of this initial amazing opportunity, and that we probably would need to invite some other people or think about what would happen next. So what are you guys thinking? What's going to happen?
So, you know, Karen lives and breathes this, but what I talked about where we had idea A and idea B, and if those combine together to give some benefit C that wasn't anticipated before, that's something that could be new intellectual property. So one of the first things we want to do is to pull all these ideas together, sort them out, clean them up, filter them, categorize them, organize them, dice and slice them and put them together in different ways. So we'll be doing that, Steve, you and me, with Nuri and Rashi to help us. And then from that, we're going to try and boil it down to 4 to 6 different concepts, which are unique, that could be a Jaguar, you know, initiative that everyone else is like, why didn't we think of that first? We'll capture that, send that into Karen's shop, and then have that be our intellectual foundation. Then we're going to start looking for faculty members that can participate in these, because as much as possible, we want this to be interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, to engage people from a number of different fields and different schools within our campus. And then from there, we're trying to find the right people who are interested and fascinated to try this out. Maybe they're going to be junior faculty members who are looking for some new exciting thing to be able to make their mark. Or it might be near end of career professors who are like, I've got so many ideas, I've never tried them all. Anyway, we want to find those people who are interested, eager, and excited to try this out. And then we start turning those into proposals that we take either to a federal funding agency or to companies that are working in fabrics, and maybe some of the like the Under Armour and the Nike, the people who are going to have a vice president of research, they're looking for what's the next cool best thing. Wouldn't it be great if they were able to fund us on our campus for us to take these ideas that came out of this discussion and then start turning that into sponsored research projects? We get students to get onboarded onto that, and from the foundation that we'll be building from the bricks that you guys all provided, we can start coming up with new ideas as well. So these will be platform ideas that lead to multiple different things to create a large portfolio of ideas, so that once we get the momentum going, other people say, I want to participate. And hopefully we'll be all generating so many new ideas that spawn and sprout out of this, like Jim's sprouts, that will have a really campus-wide approach, that it'll be something that people will write books about, because they'll say, what a cool idea. So many academics are in their silo, and IUPUI brought them all together. And this goes back to the vision that Petronio and Bance came up with, and the whole idea behind this trip enterprise. So let's start on that trip. I want to thank you all very much for taking the first step with us.
And I want to thank you for helping us get to this place. When Peter was awarded the Bance Petronio Translating Research into Practice Faculty Award, and we had our first conversation, he at that moment said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to take advantage of this? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? And then here we are. We are here. You guys are the beginning of this amazing journey of what's going to happen next. And I'm just thrilled to know that I get to wear this cape more than today, because you just mentioned lots of opportunities where we're going to be able to come together, and maybe the rest of our team here will have to get some capes too, since they're the foundation of this entire idea. And I love how that you've challenged us to come back together in different ways, and all the possibilities of where this could go, and that it's really about the spirit of IUPUI, and that it includes everybody. It includes students, faculty, and community. We can't be better than that. Well, we could. We're going to be successful. So thank you, Peter. And so what I'm hearing you say is, this is it for today. We've pulled everything that we have out of our brains for right now. So what we need to do is, we all need to go and nourish our brains and get them reset for tomorrow. So whatever that you need to do, whether that's food, rest, exercise, etc., because tomorrow is a new day. Today was fun, but tomorrow's another one. And then you'll be hearing from us after we have a chance for our little team to work together and sort the stuff out and see what next steps would be. But we do want you to think about other people that we should be inviting to this table. And if you could send that to any of us, we would love to start collecting that information. Can you think of anything else, Peter, that we need to say before we would thank these people for giving up a piece of their day?
I think we need some closing remarks by Chancellor Bance.
All right.
Well, what I can say is thank you all for being here, but also thank you, Jim, for the sprout metaphor. I love this. Sprouts, as we know, are very prolific. They're interconnected to their neighbors. They are healthy, in spite of their appearance. And the idea of using the cape for this is a nice playback to what I think we're talking about, which is the sprouting of ideas. And so for me, this was a great circular set of metaphors. But I thank Peter for the energy and ideas to do this, and all of you for coming together. It is an example of what we hope happens on this campus. Thank you much.
Great. Well, thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you again as we continue the Cape of Wonders. Thank you.
Thank you for joining all.